Good afternoon, everybody, or good day for some of you. I'm Richard Porter. I'm responsible for a team at AspenTech looking after some of our key chemical and pharmaceutical accounts in Europe. So many thanks to everybody here for joining today's webinar. Apologies for the slight delay, we had a few technical issues. Today we have GlaxoSmithKline and Wood presenting on their journeys in rolling out machine learning applications to extract data from into an actionable form. This has in turn driven improved reliability and huge value for their end customers. So special thanks go out to our presenters at GSK and Wood today for volunteering to share their digital transformation learnings with you today. And of course for choosing to work with AspenTech towards that goal. Obviously, we are all working in exceptional times, not just in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, but just the general volatility and uncertainty in the manufacturing sector. We're seeing massive drops in demand in one area and one sector, while seeing big spikes in demand in other areas. All of this while operating with minimized staff levels and a further heightened focus on employee and customer safety. So with 75 new customers implementing Aspen Mtel in the last 2 years, we're providing manufacturers with tools that manage and reduce the uncertainty of the current situations, remotely avoiding breakdowns, shutdowns, catastrophic failures that at best put the manufacturer's supply chains at risk and at worst put people's lives in danger. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Justin Ames, who will be moderating the event from here. Thank you, and over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Richard, and hello everyone, and welcome. I'm Justin Eames, so I'll be your moderator today. As Richard said, I'm going to manage the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So if you carry on putting your questions into the Q&A section, we'll have a look at those at the end. I'm based on the south coast of England, and I'm responsible for leading a team of solution consultants within Europe. And we strive to help our customers drive value and create a vision in realizing the value of AI and machine learning based solutions from our selection of programs and realizing this into their production facilities. So it's my pleasure to be asked to introduce some really important customers to our goal. And these companions with AspenTech on the journey of implementation are Wood and also GSK. So they've got some great stories to tell you today. And first of all, I'm going to start by introducing Wood. And Wood have developed quite a unique vision into the world of digital transformation when implementing machine learning based solutions. And we've got Sean and Jeff who have joined us today to talk about their digital journey into machine learning with Aspen Mtel. So just over to Sean.
Thank you, Justin. I'm Sean Johnston. I'm a director in the automation and control part of Wood. As part of this talk, we're just going to quickly go through digital transformation and what it means for Wood and Wood's clients, and then leading into Mtel and the work we're doing with AspenTech that we think really helps us realize some of the goals around digital transformation. Before we go there, I'll just give a quick introduction to Wood. So go on to the next slide. Wood is a global leader in the engineering and consultancy businesses. We work with a number of clients across a number of sectors, and our capability, our support drives right away from conception of projects through into operations and through actually into often decommissioning of those projects. Myself and Jeff, as I mentioned, come from the automation and control group inside Wood. The automation and control group is essentially a group which delivers integrated solutions. So we'll work right the way from the sensors in an asset through to control systems, and then what we're talking through here into the solutions, the software solutions, the digital solutions we layer on top of those to support our operations. Go to the next slide. Wood works across a number of different sectors. Can you drive on to the next slide, please? Sir? Thanks. Wood works across a number of sectors, from, as you see, infrastructure right the way across into energy and oil and gas. This diverse diverse client portfolio really gives us a good opportunity to leverage best in class from different sectors and to build that into our best practices. Here, obviously, we're focusing on life sciences and pharma. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about on this next slide is really a step into why Wood in digital transformation in manufacturing, or companies like Wood. As you can see on the right-hand graphic here, we all know there's a number of reasons why that prevent digital transformation from really taking a foothold in manufacturing and other industrial operations. In a way, it's lagging behind, you could say, some of the more business-driven processes. We believe in Wood that our knowledge of operations, our understanding of hence the need and the value that you can drive out of operations, together with our experience of over 20 years now of delivering, probably actually over 30 years, of delivering digital technologies that help operators optimize and sometimes actively control some of the difficult operations they have to do, together with systems integration, the types of data we're using. Does a advisory piece have to be real time? Does it have to tell an operator in minutes? Or is it more of a maintenance issue that people need to understand over months or weeks? And then lastly, into understanding that workflow and how actually workflows, you can have all the technology in the world, you can have all the best systems in the world, but if you can't manage the operations workflow and the management of change about how we're going to import effectively this new way of working into how an asset is operated, then this all really just falls apart. I'm going to leave it with that, but I think what we're going to talk about today really is how data is key, but then how some of the tools now that people like AspenTech are developing really start to change the jobs and combine the roles of what would be a traditional, say, process engineer, mechanical engineer, and operations engineer, so that they're deriving much more value from their day-to-day work. Over to you, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. So what we'll be discussing is digital transformation from an operations perspective and enabling speed to value, and we'll discuss some of the architecture, reference architecture, and items that we look for to achieve in our journey. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in terms of transforming the business, approximately 70 to 80% of the time spent is data gathering and basically understanding that data and visualization to get to the point of developing value. And that is not necessarily great time spent, because during that period, we are not adding value to the business. So part of that, so what we're trying to achieve is transforming data in silos to integrated actionable intelligence, improve workflows with greater visualization and analysis functions, integrated command centers to reduce time to troubleshoot and coordinate operations and maintenance activities, task personnel and contractors where you need them versus prescriptive manning and rounds, or just continuous maintenance on a machine regardless of its status. Increase the productivity of people and the organization. Collaboration with central and field personnel in real time. Asset surveillance for improved operations, failure avoidance, maintenance, and ultimately safety. Adding value to the business in real time with scalable solutions is the goal, and particularly scalable is something that's very important from the tech perspective. Next slide. Okay. From an enablement perspective, this is a fundamental of what we're looking for. You may have heard terms of data lake or data layer, other things like that. And really what we're talking about is high level of integrating data, both real time and event driven, for example, or just pure reference information like a drawing or engineering repository. So owner organizations have many disparate systems with stranded data, adding a level of difficulty when making business decisions. Each system has its own focus, owners and experts that are contributors with views that are somewhat isolated to each of their respective domains. This makes information difficult to navigate and not readily understandable real time and how it correlates to their job necessarily, where it takes large groups of people to solve problems at a table. What data is germane to the problem and what decisions need to be made is there data that supports the position, or is something we are overlooking? And these are questions we constantly have when we're doing problem solving and data analysis with that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so from a high-level reference architecture perspective in technology, this is often what we're looking to achieve in parts or in total, depending on the perspective. So from an enablement perspective, starting at the bottom layer, so basically operating data, this is real-time, could be IoT data that's adding value to the organization. There's historical data from, let's say, process historian. IP21 is a good example of that. Integrity data from mechanical systems, for example. Fidelis is a good example of that category of what kind of product might be in there for integration. Business data, so accounting, business intelligence, cost that's being captured, how to correlate that kind of information from a cost perspective, help come up with what problems we really need to focus on in association with the other data that I've just determined. The other value area is basically external data. So, for example, weather, environmental data as impact operation, electrical utility usage, taking those market spot price opportunities and things like that and incorporating that into the operating model can often add gains to the organization or deter unwanted cost. The next layer of that is basically data integration and validation. That's basically integrating those systems and data in a meaningful way, as well as validation, where we really need to establish quality of data. We need to know what data we should be using in analysis work and what data that we need to toss in the bin. Next layer basically is adding value to that data for contextualization and enrichment. So socializing data from disparate systems in a meaningful way to improve the analysis work in a facility to help drive the results and instituting change. The next layer of that is really getting into applications, so tools and data science, services that need to be done, low-code environment, which is nice for basically non-computer science people to be able to do a lot of efficient and effective work with that. A modern example would be Python. An old example might be Fortran. So API and simulation are great functions and tools to be able to integrate in the platform. Simulation being, digital twinning that can be involved in that as well, where I need to really use a runtime model to really understand what my boundaries are. Then, of course, the last but not least for sure is visualization and dashboarding in this layer. So the first step in any data science work is just to basically visualize the data and gain some understanding of that. And what tools basically are able to do that in the marketplace? What technology, what platforms really do this well in the operations environment? There are many tools available, none of which, or not many of which are really fit for purpose for operations applications like we're discussing today. And then, of course, you have value-add applications, and that's intended to be, these are applications that are really bespoke to your business and that really add value to your organization. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to start talking about Intel and how this and how our journey landed us here and to discuss its value. So Intel is not just another tool, but a platform with an excellent work process to achieve speed to value, including its integration into its platform itself. Okay, next slide. First off, I want to start out with what is an agent. This is an important background for folks to understand. So machine learning agents use proprietary algorithms to calculate abnormal behavior. Types of machine learning agents that are basically being discussed are hidden failure agents, finds historical problems in training data, and excludes suspect data from the baseline normal conditions. That's an important aspect in getting rid of data that is not germane to the problem. Anomaly agent learns baseline normal and performs live monitoring to expose abnormal conditions. And then last but not least is the failure agent itself, which is learning precise, specific failure signature and performs live monitoring, providing early warnings of reoccurrences. So this is where we're really starting the high value of preventing failing critical equipment. So agents are trained on historical data, including the events that are occurring as well. And then also agents all have internal signatures used to characterize the agent. Agents are models developed within Aspen MTEL for monitoring live data streams to determine when an asset requires maintenance, inspection, potential changes, operating conditions, or just, basically needs an overhaul. Okay. Next slide. So for the work process, MTEL is a fit-for-purpose machine learning for process assets, and this is where the high value comes in. This is fit for the problems that we're solving in the operation and maintenance environment. So I'm going to discuss, we want to discuss work process with speed to value, data visualization and analysis, identifying contributions to failures, prioritization of that, and what to ignore. So you find that some sensors really aren't adding any contribution one way or the other. And then, of course, we're ultimately trying to create normal, anomaly, and failure agents. Integration with time series data and work order systems is a key aspect. I don't want my value one time. I want my value perpetually in the future. And that comes into the real-time monitoring of those agents, inclusive of the notifications to operations, reliability, basically critical people in your organization and your asset that are really doing that day-to-day management and taking action. And also the value of integrating procedures and advice to prevent the failure, which is part of that notification as well. Next slide. Okay. So from a general work process perspective, what do I need? What do I need to get started? So basically what we would typically be looking for is PFDs and PNIDs, make sure that we do understand that process. Mechanical drawings or pictures. I can tell you that a mechanical drawing is great, but having actual pictures in the process of repairing, during the repair of a major piece of equipment is highly valuable in the exercise to calibrate people to the problem. Control system displays are also valuable. And then, of course, process historical data, and then the work orders and event history that you need that are really tying that sensor data to the actual event and problem that's occurring in the facility. And then from a work process perspective, design workshops are definitely recommended to do. This is excellent to opportunity to calibrate stakeholders in the manufacturing facility so that we're all on the same mission going on that journey. And as part of that process, you would be able to identify what are the big hits that need to be taken care of from the indigenous people in that manufacturing facility. Identify the assets and basically the sensors of value that we're looking to achieve to quickly get, as I said, speed to value. So next step is basically prepare import template. That is fundamentally just planning the work. So when we're looking at that, we're just planning out our work as we would do for any good project execution from that perspective. The next step is to visualize and analyze the data. MTEL's visualization functionality and analysis of data in the operations environment is excellent. And that front-end component alone is worth its use when it comes to this type of environment when you're relating process data to basically machinery. The other is we need to eliminate non-contributors that are not really adding value, and we need to look for others that if we're not getting the proper probability results that we're looking for, there may be some other sensors that we need to add in. The next step is train the agents for normal, and I'll go back. Go back a slide, please. Thank you. We train the agents for basic anomaly and failure. The next is basically deploying that in the real-time environment, and of course, many good applications are going to have some tuning functionality for that. tuning as required, and potential new normal, and then start to receive those high value predictions for assets to improve operations and manufacturing in general. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is just basically a visualization of what I just talked about from a work process perspective. So, communicating with the existing systems, basically real-time dynamically, which is plant historian and enterprise asset management. Equipment set profiling, which is basically defining the equipment boundary and mapping those sensors. Historical work order information. This is important. This is telling us the history of what our problems are, and that integration into the real-time environment is really what we need. And that perpetual change as new work orders coming in the future, so we can also look for new failures, new normals with that. Then, of course, agent creation, and then deploying that agent. Okay, next slide. And then my last slide here is really to talk about some of the value of the enterprise asset management integration that MTEL provides. So AspenTech MTEL automatically connects to any large library, of popular EAM systems. EAM systems are basically used to organize plants' available assets and work order history, and then communication with the EAM systems as well, to automatically populate MTEL with new information and update it from asset hierarchy information, new work orders, things like that, as I said, to perpetually keep receiving value and increasing that value over time. So automatically send back data to the EAM system as well. This is basically integrating with work orders so we can have those work order requests and those alerts to the organization that action needs to be taken on this asset. Okay, next slide. That's it. Thank you very much. Justin, back to you.
Excellent. Thanks for your presentation, Jeff and Sean. That was excellent to see how to not only start a digital journey, but also seeing how to integrate with existing data and probably more importantly the workflows as well. So thank you. So next to present to you is GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, and GSK have embarked on a multi-pronged digitalization journey, which they're going to talk all the way through. And this focuses on where solutions can be automated and directly impact the important business drivers for GSK. So we've got Kevin and David on the call today, and they join us to present how Aspen MTEL has been applied to these critical use cases across its global network of pharmaceutical plants. So Kevin, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Can you hear me? Sound check?
Yeah, you're good.
Yep, good. Okay. So guys, thanks, Justin, for the invitation to present today. I'm delighted, and it's good to hear Jeff and Sean from Wood talk first around the capability and the approach for the value of MTEL. What I'd like to talk about for the next maybe 20 minutes is GSK's journey to deploying the tool and actually delivering some benefit to the business. I have sponsored the MTEL deployment across the pharma supply chain within GSK for the last three years, and Dave McFarland, who's on the call as well, has led the program. So the next couple of slides will just explain our pathway. So the scope of the talk is I'll give you an overview of GSK and the pharma supply chain. I'd also like to share the MTEL deployment approach within the supply chain. I'm going to talk through some case studies, and then finally, where do we go from here on building capability and really accelerating the business benefit to the pharma supply chain for future years. Go to the next slide, please. So the GSK pharma supply chain is a large network. It's 30 sites across 18 countries. Last year, we manufactured 2.3 billion packs of medicine. This is one of 3 manufacturing businesses within GSK. We also have a large vaccines business. We also have a large consumer healthcare business. But what I'm focusing this talk on today is the MTEL deployment within the pharma supply chain. Okay, next slide. And this is some of our products. So we've got a very wide range of products. from respiratory products, epilepsy, antibiotics, and HIV products. So, these are all life-saving medicines and all validated processes. So equipment wellness is critical to ensure we've got robust processes manufacturing these medicines. Go to the next slide. And this is an overview of the geography that we operate in, 30 sites across 18 countries, across all continents. Okay, so the next slide is our roadmap. And I guess we're 3 years now working on MTEL. We started in 2018 on a pilot basis where we've got 4 manufacturing kind of divisions within the pharma supply chain, and we picked 3 of those, and we targeted MTEL pilots on lead sites across the 3 manufacturing supply chains with some limited licenses. And we had mixed success. I think our biggest UDE was that we weren't good at picking case studies where to apply this technology. So in 2019, we adjusted our focus and really focusing on top reliability problems. So what are the problems that are really hurting us from a supply perspective, from a cost perspective? And I guess what we did is we put in a screening process to really help us identify the applications where we had best chance of success and best chance of delivering a successful outcome. And we also aligned under our pharma supply chain digital and automation steering, which really raised the profile of the program, and we got sponsorship for more license coverage. And where we are in 2020, where I think we're in a position now that we have a number of wins under our belt. And now we're looking at actually scaling and actually building that capability to allow us to scale and tracking the benefits, tracking deployment, and really allowing us to actually embed this as a new tool, as a new way of working for engineers at all our manufacturing sites. And we also have the license covers to allow us to actually go for that network deployment. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the key question, I think, is where we apply this technology, and we put together this checklist to kind of help us identify, where do we apply it, that we get the business benefit, and really challenge ourselves. Is there a better solution, or is MTEL the right solution? And I think really we're targeting long-term persistent reliability issues. Focus on issues where if we do have a failure, that it is very impactful to the business. But also kind of challenge ourselves around, do we have the knowledge and do we have the data to have a successful outcome? So, do we know the failure mode? And have we done problem solving in the past that we haven't got the root cause? Do we have sufficient data and sensors to actually generate a sensible AI outcome? Does the site have the technical knowledge to act on the predicted failure? So these are some of the questions that we're asking ourselves as part of this STP process at the start to help us identify the projects that are likely to be successful. So if you go to the next slide. So we put in this 4-step process, and the first step is that pre-screen to ask all those questions in the previous slide. The second step, which I thought was the most difficult step, was to actually do the diagnostic and to actually build the agent and to do the technical piece to actually develop a model. But I think steps 2 and 3 are probably even more challenging, is to actually take the output from that technical work and to actually convince the business that it's actually real and we can actually validate that it is the right, is telling us the right insight, and we need to make a decision and to make an intervention based on the data. So I think the business acceptance is really important, and that I wouldn't underestimate the effort in that. And then step 4 is to actually embed standard work to actually react to the agent alert, and then to track and to trend the outcomes such that we're continually improving the quality of the agent. So this is the 4 steps we track, and for all the use cases we have now, we're actually tracking them against, are we in step 1, 2, 3, or 4? And that really helps us to measure the maturity of the program. So if we go to the next step. Okay, so what makes a good machine learning case study for us? Obviously, you need data, you need a history of failure, and you need a value, or you need a price to go after. Some of the targets that we have been successful with is around critical utilities, where we have expensive, maintenance tasks that are very kind of costly with respect to resource and spares, and where we can actually do better, more effective maintenance, and where we also, if we have downtime of line, that it is really, really expensive. So can we actually make better maintenance interventions? We've also some success with top processing problems, such as optimizing cleaning cycles and reducing deviations. And some of the challenges have been very much around the data, and do we have contextualized data, and have we enough data to actually generate a model that's going to actually give us the data we need? There's two outcomes, and I think the first outcome is the traditional one, where we actually build the agent to predict the failure. We make an intervention 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks ahead of when that failure happens, and that's one outcome. Or the second outcome is where we get a new insight, which really helps us with our RCA process, and that helps us solve the problem for good. And in that situation, then we'll turn off the agent and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so that's, and so this is an overview of use cases. I think we've hit 10 sites of the 30 at this stage across the pharma supply chain. We started in 2018. I think this is a snapshot of where we see the value with respect to maintenance and also with respect to productivity of our lines or factories. At the moment, we've got 53 machine learning agents live across the pharma supply chain, across these 10 sites. And I think some of them alert every week, some of them haven't alerted yet, but I think, we have the ambition that I'd like to get that to kind of, four additional agents every month, such that, or every week, sorry, such that we would get to a point that 50 will go to 100, will go to 200 in the next year, 2 years. And this approach kind of is embedded into the business. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I have a few case studies here. The first case study is a mill in a secondary site. This is a new process. And if we do have a mechanical seal failure on the mill, we basically compromise the batch. So at the moment, we actually replace the mechanical seal every 8 batches, and it's a very expensive task to actually do that. So the driver here was actually, can we actually predict when the mechanical seal is going to fail? We know the process is probably stressing the mechanical seal, but can we actually do this based using MTEL and generate an AI agent to help us when we need to actually make that maintenance intervention? And we have successfully done that. And our target is to go to 25 batches where we actually clean, and that would have the impact of reducing our maintenance cost by 60%, and potentially also actually generating new capacity for the process and avoid capital in the future. So this one we're quite excited about this one. It's probably, we're probably only a few months in at this stage, but it's one that we actually see a lot of benefit in. So if you go to the next slide, please. Case study 2 is a purified water application where we've got a purified water generation plant. We've got a lot of purified water generation plants supporting a lot of our factories. It's a fairly standard piece of equipment, process equipment. And last year at one of our factories, we had a core deionization unit failed, which resulted in plant downtime that we didn't have any redundancy. Typically this is a robust piece of equipment, but when it does fail, the impact is large. So what we've done is we've built an agent to based on the failure to actually identify when it's going to fail. The agent will now alarm, I think if I think maybe 15 days before, or 35 days before the unit fails, and that allows us really, to plan in the downtime and minimize the downtime to actually get to fix the unit and to avoid the business impact of losing 15 batches in 1 week's production. So this one is interesting. It doesn't fail a lot. It's got a high impact, but it's also from a replication point of view. We have replicated this at 3 other factories already, and we're targeting to replicate this everywhere within the network to really help us improve the reliability of our purified water generation plants. Okay, and the last case study is next. So this is the final case study. It's in an API application where we've got a continuous dryer. We have an issue with the continuous dryer that if the product is wet, that it tends to block and choke, which results in downtime with respect to unblocking the unit. Also results in occupational hygiene issues with opening up the unit. And I think in 2018 there's around 45 hours downtime. So an opportunity around reducing downtime costs, increasing capacity, and actually addressing some of our occupational hygiene issues around unblocking. And this agent is alarms quite a bit, as you can see. It's also helping us, I think, problem solving, that we're probably starting to get to the root cause of the blockages now and improving the process to actually avoid the downtime and also reduce our maintenance costs. Okay, so if you go to the last slide, I'll leave time for questions. So where do we go from here? I guess we're 3 years into our journey. I think to date we have been very reliant on Justin, and we've been very reliant on Aspen technical support. So our biggest challenge is to build GSK's capability. So we have a plan to embed that within the business, and we identify champion super users within the business that can actually own us and actually drive it, and actually we become self-sufficient. And we're also looking at creating a central capability for some of the more meatier kind of big problems that we need to solve across the pharma supply chain. And we've also negotiated this service wrapper, which I think Aspen have called it, which really is our kind of 12, 18-month training plan to get GSK up the curve and we start weaning ourselves off the Aspen support. So that's, I think there is some support in there for running more pressure cookers, running more diagnostics with Aspen. But I think as part of that, the best way of actually learning MTEL is actually by doing, and actually by generating agents, and actually by getting out there and actually applying the technology. We're also looking at actually training and having super users that are certified through the Aspen certification program. And we're also going to maintain the weekly technical lifeline with Aspen, which I think is useful to really ensure that as a program of activity that we are, we are doing a health check every week, and we are kind of identifying, where the agents that actually potentially need some support, and we need to improve further. So I'm going to stop there. It's a flavour of our journey. I think it's obviously very much aligned to our digitalization strategy. I'm a chemical engineer, and I think from an engineering perspective, this is another tool in the toolbox, and I think it helps us to actually preempt problems and free up engineers' time from doing deviations and closing deviations to predicting deviations, improving processes, and actually adding value to the business. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. And for the last slide, this is GSK's GSK's mantra, really. There's patient in the supply chain. All the processes that products we manufacture are life-saving medicines, and I see MTEL and machine learning, as a route of us doing better maintenance to make our processes better and make and improve the quality of our products. So thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing that journey with us. It's wonderful actually to see how you've expanded your initial scope. You've gone through this journey, and now you've got this rollout program across the full enterprise. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks also for sharing some of those use cases as well, and helping us understand some of the value that Mtel's already started to bring you. So I'm going to move on now to questions and answers. I've got a number of questions come in, and I'm going to try to manage those. And actually, what we do find at the end of the presentations is these start to accelerate. So I've got a number to go through, and I'm going to continue to address the new ones as they come in as well. And we'll see how we do in the allotted time. So first of all, I'm going to just have a look at the global strategy from Jeff, from your angle. And there's a question: are you able to develop a global strategy, or is this a case-to-case basis? And I think we've seen from Kevin that there's a global strategy there in GSK, but I just wanted to get Jeff your ideas on it.
Yeah. So there are small tools out there that are only for a case basis, but Mtel is a platform that can be planned and rolled out basically organizationally to solve these problems from a corporate perspective, and that does differentiate this product and platform quite a bit to that. So developing a strategy globally, as Kevin discussed for GSK, this is definitely achievable in this platform.
Thanks, Jeff. I've got a question for GSK, actually. We've got David on the call, and David, you may be able to answer this one. We've got a question saying, out of interest, were any of the agents applied to vibration data? It looks mainly process data.
Yeah, where we tackled it was we were looking at historical data, and generally speaking, we were working with the IP21. So we have a different sort of vibration strategy around the sites, which is handheld equipment, and then some of the criticals we have on sensors. But where a lot of the sites are going in the future, they're actually looking to use the Mtel platform to start looking at vibration sensors, so adding in additional sensors where those are missing, and using the Mtel software to analyze the sensors as well. So I think there's real opportunity there, and it will reduce the complexity in terms of having to buy different software. And if we need to get further insight into diagnostics, we can use handheld equipment. So I think that's where we see the future is it's an opportunity to merge systems together rather than have separate systems. So a couple of sites are currently looking at proposals around that. Okay.
Thanks, David. So I've got a question for Sean, and that is, how many failures would you need to teach an agent in an AI program to predict a failure? I'm going to get Sean's view on this, and I'm just going to move that over to Kevin as well. So Sean first.
I'm not sure if I can answer that one, because I think there's a colleague of mine that answered it.
Okay, sorry for that.
I'll pick it up. So, well, I mean, it really depends on the case. Once you analyze the data, there are cases where you find that there's really one sensor that's giving your answers, or there's a combination of many sensors in cases, including machinery sensors as well, that are used to predict the outcome. And some sensors may need to be added to differentiate product grades, for example, when the training is being reused for multiple products. So there are things, different situations for different problems.
Yeah, I suppose it's fundamentally due to what the problem is and the correlation between that problem and what one of your sensors are picking up. If it's a certain issue which pushes an incredibly high temperature, for instance, downstream, then you're going to detect that very quickly. One or two failures, you're probably going to predict it quite easily. But if it's a much more complex problem that has a much more complex effect on the system and the process, obviously you're just going to require a lot more failures to really train the model without it giving you false positives.
Okay, excellent. And Kevin, I just wondered your take on that with some experience, or maybe David wants to answer it, in terms of pharmaceuticals, because this is very interesting pharmaceuticals where your data is quite constant.
Yeah, I think, you know, the more failure data you have, the better. And it's because I think it helps you raise confidence. But I think, you know, some of our newer ones, we don't have any failure data. So I think some of the new features of MTEL can actually create models that actually predict failure data. But I think to convince the business it's real, I think the more failure data you have, you know, the more confidence you have in the agent, and it's probably easier to embed it. But if you don't have failure data, I think you're very much reliant on some of the features of MTEL now to actually create that failure, which sometimes is difficult then to actually convince the business that this is the failure mechanism and failure trend. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Question directly for Wood. What tools are used by Wood for data integration, validation, contextualization from internal, external systems? You talked a lot about connecting the data.
Yeah, so the question was what product?
What tools are used by Wood for data integration and contextualization?
So we have some platforms, some technology platforms that we have selected for this type of work. We do have a core platform that's very targeted to our operations and control environment for that. There are other ways to do this as well. There are open platforms. You know, obviously Azure and AWS, for example, would have some of those. AspenTech is also introducing technology around this space as well. So if you with the AspenTech kit, those are definitely worth looking at. But mainly it's basically it's a platform use of that reference architecture that you need to be targeting, and how this complex systems integration model fits together. For different organizations, it's different problems to solve on how that'll be achieved. Some organizational goals are big and broad, and some are small and compartmentalized within a single asset. And so we have different solutions for different problems, basically.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. So I've got rather a lot of questions here. So just give me a few seconds. There's one question for GSK, which may be an interesting one. Can you explain a little more about how MTEL helps to reduce cleaning cycle times?
Yeah. Well, it's not the cleaning cycle time. It's actually when you need to clean. I think two of our case studies have been we clean on a fixed repeating cycle based on a number of batches, and the cleaning is to actually, you know, is to ensure that we don't have a deviation, or we don't that the mechanical seal on an agitator doesn't actually fail. And what we're doing now is we're trying to actually, rather than doing activity-based cleaning, we're actually doing a cleaning cycle based on machine wellness, based on the MTEL agent. So we're trying to actually do it more scientifically, based on data, rather than actually doing it based on activity and time.
Thanks, Kevin. And there's just another question which maybe you want to answer as well. Are there any cultural changes that have been adopted with your fresh approach to addressing root causes within the manufacturing process?
I think it's a good question. I think we have invested very heavily in data, and you know, we have state-of-the-art control systems. Everything's integrated. sophisticated lab systems, enterprise systems. But when we use, we probably use a fraction of the data to actually control the process. And then when the process goes wrong, then we use all the data for root cause analysis. And I think, the big culture shift is, can we actually make more use of the data early to actually improve our process control rather than actually use it when the process goes wrong? And I see we're probably on that journey, and it probably is one of the biggest opportunities to me in our digital journey to say, can we actually, create better processes using the data and actually creating tools like MTEL agents to actually help us actually improve our process control.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, also the further insight into that is that when we've created agents and that, we've also better understand the actual, better understand the process. So on the continuous dryer, it was able to reveal other issues we had upstream. So the MTEL system works by prioritizing sensors, and it came up with, different sensors. And so, as you were saying previously, we've been able to make improvements in the process. So beyond just looking at the failure, it's also, the culture is there that we do make more use of these sensors, and MTEL does give us further insights into our processes.
Thanks, Dave, for adding that. For Jeff, could you provide an example of how MTEL approaches unsupervised learning? So, for example, where we've not captured any failure history yet, how transferable are agents between similar equipment types across different assets?
Yeah, so you can use those agent models and redeploy them, and then you can basically learn new normals on data. So it's very redeployable in that exercise. Some of it is going to be you do need to line up the sensors from one site to the other of what's going to be pulling that data, for example, but that's just very simply a mapping exercise. So it's fully reproducible for what you're doing, and then the retraining efforts are basically built into the platform to do.
And Jeff, just another part of that question: where there is no failure history, is it possible to create agents?
So yes, there is, but you do need to have some event timeline to tie to. So, for example, the temperature went less than 20. Something to tie the machine learning algorithm to. This is what I'm trying to predict. You need to have some target of prediction that you're doing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a work order.
And I'll just add to that if you do train the system just on normal behavior, it will identify abnormal, but you still need to reference that to an event, right? You still need to say, I know what that is, so I can trust it as being abnormal. So there's an element of unsupervised in there, but you're right. It's best to align with something you know.
Yeah.
I guess also, Jeff, the knowledge of what's in your data is the most important thing when you're training on history.
Absolutely. As I was saying in the presentation, the first step in any good data analyst work is to actually look at the data, to visualize it, and the MTEL platform's visualization capability is excellent, especially for simultaneous viewing and integration of data, and even creating some of those event points on your own, so you know what you're trying to target for, so you can realize that basically pattern.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Jeff. That's great insight. So I'm going to close the Q&A now. We do have several that we haven't answered, so we'll be looking at answering those at the end of the webinar. So we will come back if you haven't had your question answered. But I'd like to thank everyone for their presentations today and all the attendees for joining. We had a great turnout today. So thank you very much for that. I'll hand over now to Angela.
Thanks, Justin. I just wanted to thank our audience for joining us today. You will have downloading of this event very soon, within the next 2-4 days. And most importantly, I wanted to thank our speakers today, Kevin and David from GSK, Sean and Jeff from Wood. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for great presentation. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone.